here on behalf of the Texas Trial Lawyers Association and myself, and I want to talk with the committee about HB2003. Your point of clarification just then, Mr. Chairman, has a substantial impact on what I had to say about this bill. If the language in this bill merely transfers the ministerial acts that are currently being undertaken by the Comptroller's Office to the Attorney General's office, then much of that which I had to say, voicing my concerns about the bill, are not relevant. Because if you're not changing anything other than the purely ministerial acts that are performed by the Comptroller as the law currently exists, then I would still be in opposition to the bill, because we think the Comptroller is the place where it ought to be. But my point about this legislation wouldn't have application, because see, it says here. Are you looking at the committee sub, Mr. Gallagher? Yes. Okay. Section 140.012. Contingency approval required for public agencies. Public agency as defined by Section 30.003 Water Code may not enter into a contract described by Subchapter C 2254 Government Code without review and approval by the Attorney General. My concern about that is that changes the nature of the review process, but it's not your intention to do so, according to what you just stated. No, it's not my intention to do so, Mr. Gallagher. I do want to just clarify for the record that this bill, and we've talked about this off the record, this bill was brought to me by the Comptroller's Office with the support of the AG's office, and it's my understanding, and Mr. Godby can correct me if I'm wrong, that this is just about who's reviewing and making the decisions on these contracts. It's my understanding that's all this is about, and as I read my committee sub here, that's how I read it. I tell you what, why don't I call on Mr. Godby right now, and Mr. Gallagher, I can come back to you if anything we've said is not accurate, or you can refute anything Mr. Godby says. Is that okay? Well, I did want to correct the chairman on one thing. Oh no, what's that? We were all in agreement on House Bill 1974, I believe, in 2011. I checked with Mr. Parsley a moment ago, and he confirmed that this wasn't the first time that we've had agreement. There was one other time, albeit some years back. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Maybe we can get there on this one. Yeah, I hope that we... I see what you're saying. So the previous bill you had back when? In 1974? No, 2011. I said 1911. That was my birthday. Got it. Actually, it was 2011. All right. And it was, I forgot the House bill number, but Mr. Parsley confirms my recollection. I was like, wow. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Let me temporarily pull you down and recognize Josh Godby from the Office of the Attorney General. If you'll state your name, your affiliation, your position on the bill for the record.
Thank you, Chairman and members. My name is Joshua Godby. I'm the Chief of the Financial Litigation and Charitable Trust Division at the Texas Attorney General's Office. I'm here today on the bill as a resource witness. I'm happy to answer any questions, specifically with the issue that Mr. Gallagher has raised. 140.012 is, with the exception of the language that's added in the sub to carve out a couple kinds of contracts, is the exact same language that exists for the comptroller's portion of their statute right now, which would be repealed. There actually is no language change. It's the exact same language being moved over in terms of the roles and responsibilities, just subbing out the comptroller with the Office of the Attorney General.
So, Mr. Godby, was my answer correct or accurate? I should say that this is simply about who's making the decision, not what factors are used.
Yes, that's correct.
To make the decision.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Davis.
Thank you. So, in your explanation, tell me why it makes sense to move it over. What are we fixing, or why is that a better fit versus where it is today? And why do we need to change it over? Does the Attorney General want more stuff, or does the Comptroller want less stuff? I'm just curious as to why we're making that swap.
Sure. Representative Davis, I can't speak to what the comptroller doesn't want. What I can say is that this is a responsibility that the Office of the Attorney General already has for a certain set of, for the contingency fee contracts that the state enters into. So it makes sense, since we are already reviewing contingency fee contracts and looking at them, it made sense to move all of those functions on behalf of the state within our office.
Yeah, and Representative Davis, we have a resource witness here from the Comptroller's office. Jason, are you here? Jason, come on up. We take this chair right here and just move it right over there. Join them at the table if you can. Chair recognizes Jason Frizzell from the Comptroller's office. If you'll just state your name and your position on the bill.
Yes, Jason Frizzell, Deputy Chief Counsel for Contracts at the Comptroller's office, and speaking on the bill.
Okay, so can you better speak to Representative Davis's question?
Yes, it's along the lines of what Mr. Godby was saying. Our section, we're procurement attorneys. We do, contracts for the state of Texas. We don't really get involved in litigation. If we're involved in litigation, the Attorney General represents us. So we felt that it would be better to have OAG review these. It would maybe better protect the state's interest. Really, what we're doing is a very high-level administrative type review, and it doesn't seem like we're adding a whole lot of value to the process right now, frankly.
So how long has this jurisdiction been with the Comptroller's office?
Since 2008, 2009.
And so it was put over in 2008, 2009?
Yes.
And so have you reviewed contracts or not? Have there been contracts you've reviewed?
Yes, ma'am. We've reviewed many contracts.
Did you all protect the state's interest?
We reviewed these contracts to make sure they complied with Subchapter C of the 2254 of the Government Code.
So did you protect the state's interest? As a comptroller, did you all do a good job and protect the state's interest, or did you flub up and we need to get the AG to do it?
No, ma'am.
I'm just trying to understand.
I don't believe we flubbed up. The contracts we reviewed complied with the statute. If they didn't review them, we worked with the entity to fix them so that they were complying with the statute. I think we've seen a large increase in contracts that are related to these big tort litigation.
But this isn't. Does that fit under that? Does this kind of? Did you see some of those contracts?
Yes, we've seen many contracts that have dealt with litigation against opioid pharmaceutical companies. The Chrysler Fiat litigation, Volkswagen, those types of things.
Did you all review those contracts at the Comptroller?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, under the Water Code, you envision those kind of contracts to come as well?
My understanding was the Water Code definition was used so that to capture a large variety of entities. It's not related necessarily to litigation under the Water Code.
I understand, but it does pick up much more area, right?
Yes, it was intended to capture virtually every local government entity in the state of Texas.
So in my last question for the Comptroller, is it your thought that when this is moved over to the AG, you will have no more responsibility to review any kind of legal contracts for the state? Does this in your this responsibility in the agency?
With regard to contingent fee contracts, we do review contracts as part of the contract advisory team.
But when you move this over, will you retain that responsibility, or will this then relieve you of needing to have that division over at the Comptroller's office?
No, this would not affect our section. This is a very small part of what we do. Like I said, we're procurement attorneys. We have plenty of other contracts to work on. This is well less than an FTE.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Once this scope of services that you provide right now for the state is moved over to the Attorney General, you, as a comptroller, probably will not have any other role in this kind of contractual discussion in the future. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Members, any other questions for the comptroller's office? Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. Go back and sit down. Okay, Mr. Godby, did you have anything else you wanted to offer? Members, any questions for the AG's office? Okay, so Mr. Gallagher, I'm going to re-recognize you, and do you have any questions or follow-up thoughts on this?
There was only one additional inquiry that I would make with regard to this. I don't know if the contingent fees have to be reviewed. It would seem to me, Mr. Chairman, that you might want to at least consider whether or not hourly fees have to be reviewed as well, because of circumstances that have developed in other litigation in which I'm involved, in which hourly fee firms have run up as much as 700,000 hours in hourly fee charges in opioid litigation that's currently pending in Cleveland, Ohio, in the MDL.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm familiar with the manner in which this is accomplished, and an hourly fee contract can be subject, if the concern here is whether or not contingent fee process is being abused in any shape, form, or fashion, I would at least ask the chair to consider having the same standards apply to people who work on contingent fees and hourly fees, because both are capable of abuse, quite frankly. But I have not seen that occur in connection with the opioid litigation at all.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts, Mr. Gallagher. Members, any questions?